Here we are back in the 3D modeling world in Inventor, looking at my Birdbath, getting ready to build some forms. This is the existing model where I have extended the base. That's the only changes I've made. And we zoom into the base here. I've extended it 1.5 inches or 2 inches. I don't remember. I've also added a couple of holes, which wasn't visible before. Those holes are just about a 1-inch ID, and it's based on the outside diameter of 3/4 PVC, which is what I'll use in the forms to cast the holes. So here we go, where it's time to start building forms. Now we're looking at the assembled lower base of the form. This is all going to be one piece, with the exception of we've got a PVC tube, an ABS PVC pipe that's going through, that's connecting the top of the form to the bottom of the form. And this is for wiring or plumbing that I want to route from top to bottom. We've got this pattern of hex, what I'm calling the form lower base, and the actual base. So the first objective, of course, is we're going to be building the form cone. Turning off the other parts. And you see how this form is set around the tube. As we rotate it around, we can see the tube goes all the way through to the base, and that cone is hollow. I don't have a lathe. This could be easily turned down on a lathe. I don't have one of those, so we're going to build this just like a barrel. So that's the step we're moving into. Now looking at the cone itself, what you can see, it's built up of a pattern. Take a look at the pattern here. It's built of a pattern of 16 staves. The term stave is what's used to describe the parts of a barrel that come together to form the barrel. So we've got 16 staves around a 360-degree radius to form a cone as a barrel. And up close you can see the angles that have to be cut into these staves to form the cone. And here is an individual stave. As we wrote the stave around, you get a better look at the angles that we're going to need to cut into the stave in more than one axis. So not only is it tapered, but we have to cut an angle into that corner. So now, taking a look at the print, we can see what I have to make. It comes out to be 13 9/16 long, as we can see here. 13-degree angle at the base, 93-degree angle for the taper, and a 12-degree angle for each side, and it ends up being 1 7/8 inch. Now to get a look at how I'm planning on cutting this out. Here we see a very rough model of my table saw. On the table saw, we zoom in a little closer, I have a blank that will be cut out to start with. And that blank will be set on this jig that I've designed. I haven't built it yet, I've just designed it, and it's got two sides on it. The one in the front, I've got the blank into the position that's called cut 1, as you can see down here. And the one next to the simulated saw blade is on the side that's called cut 2. So I will put the blank on the form, run it through the blade as the blade's set at the proper angle for the sides, and it will cut out my staves. And this will allow me to make 16 staves that are identical. The actual dimensions of the cone are not critical. What is critical that each stave is exactly the same, so it comes into the shape of a symmetrical cone. So this is my challenge coming up, is to manufacture that jig that's going to allow me to cut out my staves. Now it's time to start making sawdust. Here's our print for the jig that we're going to use to cut out the staves. Found a piece of 1/2 inch MDF, which I'm going to use as the base plate, and I have sketched out the angles on both sides. This side with the longer end is this one here. This will be the first cut, and this one with the shorter edge here, as you can see right up here, is going to be the second cut. Now, I'm not going to machine this out. That's way too difficult. I found some thin scrap pine left over from another project where I am just going to line it up with the lines here, here, and of course on this side, and staple them in place. And that will be my cut jig. Here's the staples we're going to be using. For the first layup, I'm not going to glue them in place. Just in case something doesn't work out right, I can redo it. Got my staple gun ready. Load the staples in place. Add a little bit of air. I've got to do this around the camera, so this is going to be a little cramped for me. You can't see what's going on behind the camera, but make sure I've got some nice clean edges. And there's the first guide for my jig. I'm going to cut the blanks to get this angle right here. We have another one, another stop. It's going to be going on this side. The shadows, I need to get this to where it's not in a shadow. This might get rid of the shadow for us on the camera. Line up with that line. This is a vertical line here. I drew that vertical line to get a 1/2 inch from this edge. Per my design template, that's a 1/2 inch, although it's not shown on this print. Then a 3-degree angle intersecting this edge. So this stop is going to go on that line, but I'm going to set that once I get the blanks cut that are going to go in here. And that's the next step, is to get some blanks. Okay, we've got the stops in place, both sides. Discovered real quick this had to be a thicker material than this because our blank's going to have a 13-degree cut in it. See if we can see this. Here is the blank and the 13-degree chamfer here, which goes up against that stop. This material is much thinner. Using this as the stop meant it went into the chamfer instead of actually butting up against the edge. This is an ugly blank. This is just a test cut to see how it turns out. So this is how everything's set. We're going to set it up on here. We're going to make the first cut, which will be this one right here. I've got to set the blade angle, and I don't remember what that is. We'll have to go get the print for the actual stave to determine what my angle cut is in here. And this is the dimension of the blank, 1 7/8, 15 1/4. And this is just sketched what will be the finished cutout for the stave. It's based on 3/8 material. I don't have much 3/8 plywood, so I will probably end up resawing this out of pine to get my 16 pieces. So next up, we're going to get over to the table saw. Getting set up on a table saw, first thing we're going to do is set the blade angle. Bring our print in here, we can see we have a 13-degree angle on the base and a 12-degree angle on the sides. So we're going to have to set that for a 12-degree angle cut. First thing to do with my angle guide is zero it on the base. Now we're at 0. We just clip it on. And we're going to have 12 degrees from 90, which will be 78. And there we go. So we got a 78 angle cut. And it's time to make this go. As I was getting ready to cut, this is the bevel side. This is the outside of the cone, so it'll be sitting like this. Tapered, of course. I realized this is the outside, but this taper goes to the inside, so this has to be up. I almost made an error there, which actually means these blocks do not have to be taller than this. They can be the same size as the other ones. Because this tapers up, I label it inside up so I don't make a mistake. Now for setting the blade, or for setting the fence, I'm going to make sure there's no debris here on the table. This is the last part of the cut, and it is going to be right on the blade. Something is stopping my fence from moving. I'm going to have to go get my little dink and hammer, because I can't do this with one hand. Unknown age of this Delta saw, things don't move extremely easy. Let's get this back in place. Up against the fence on this side. And I'm just tapping this over to where I believe it will be meeting this corner. I'm going to check my dimension. I'm at 6 7/8. I'm going to move it back out a 1/16. So if this cut works, it's going to cut a taper and end up at this corner. I think I'm off camera. Oh no, okay, we're good. Again, if this works, the cut's going to end up at this corner. When I flip it around on the other side, it's going to end up at the other corner. So, check everything is good. The first cut on my jig. Alright, why didn't I cut it? I'm looking at this. I'm looking where my fingers are, I'm looking where the blade's going to cut, and it makes me nervous. So I've got well over an inch of clearance there. I don't know if I can hold this down with the push stick. Yeah, I think this will work. We don't like getting close to that blade, and it makes me nervous. So I want to make sure I'm not lining up at this angle, which goes into the blade, which might push me off. I need to be parallel with this. I might be having to add a clamp to hold this down, but we'll see what happens on this first test. Everything's clear. My fold-up bench is folded up, so I don't have an outfeed table. And it looks like my measurement was right the first time. So let's get this moved back over. 6 7/8. Pass it through again. Remember when we know that blade is stopped, when we can count these teeth. That ended up perfectly on that edge. Now if this works, we simply take this I don't think this is going to work. This jig doesn't work. Although it appears as though it's going to be the right size. So we're going to go ahead and cut this through and see if it's coming out the right size and work out how we're going to do this to cut the tapers in the right direction. The stave tapers are wrong. Knew that going into that last cut. But other than that, this end should have ended up about 5/8. And if I ignore the tapers, it is very, very close. Back to the drawing board to figure out another jig. We've got the new layout for the jig. Changed some things around so that the taper should be on the inside both times. I did the same process of putting the jig together, I just didn't film it, and I have a new blank ready to cut. Table saw fence is already set up. I did exactly the same thing I did before. If you didn't see that video, you'll have to go back and see the one where the jig was incorrect. The first one I built was wrong. So let's get set up on the table saw and make the cuts and see if this one turns out. I may have to pause this before I make cut 2. I don't know if when I do this cut here, I already proved the other one's okay using push stick. Do not know if using the push stick is going to work on this one, so I may have to pause and put in a clamp. I've got the inside marked as well as which side is the base this time. Double check this corner. Should be the last thing cut, and it's cutting too deep. I'm at 7, 1/16, we'll write that down. This is the last of the 3/8 scrap stock I have, so I need to be careful. I'm going to add 16 to that. I need to be careful not to destroy this as I'm making these cuts. A long way to work. Seems as though they're right first time. So I'll inches. Not there yet. Right there's what takes a second. And that's it. 7 7/8. Now to cut the other side, assuming this jig is right, to get the debris off the table. This time the nose goes in this side. And am I going to be confident enough to push this through? Now this is going to need a clamp to do this. There's no way I'm going to attempt this. I need to make myself a clamp, and we'll be back. You got my clamp in place. Just put a T-nut on the bottom, simple enough. Clamp, truss head screw, holding it down. It's not going to go anywhere, it's up against the stop. And I actually have a handle to push it with. Once again, don't get near that thing until you can count the teeth. I should now have my first stave. Woohoo! That's good. 13, that's 13 short. So that should be okay. Now I've got 2 points straight, work out right through, and make 15 more to the jig, see if I get back on the table saw. Grabbed a piece of plywood, and using the bandsaw, I cross-cut it to 3/8, and I'm happy with that. That'll work. Now I need a bunch of them, so I've got a whole bunch of plywood cutoffs. And if we take a look down here, you'll see a bunch of them, and that's only maybe half of what I've got spread around. So I picked out some that are just over the length I need. I've got to stop in place. I'm going to put these in, and we're going to cut them all down to the center. This one actually came out too short, as you can see. I put that aside. We're going to cut all these down so they're all the same length. Rip them to 2 inches. This one's already a good length. And we'll rip them to 2 inches and cut them down on the bandsaw. Now we have to get this set up for ripping. Since these are all remnant cutoffs, I can't be sure if these sides are square. I'm not even going to be measuring them. First cut is just to be making one good side. I'm going to mark that side so I know which one it is. That's all I need, plus 3 just in case. Ready on the bandsaw. Coming up close here, you'll see I don't have any fancy tools for my bandsaw yet. So what I've got here set up is a block that holds the original material right where it's supposed to be. Then an outfeed block that should hold the cutoff piece. Come around, looking at the back side. It should hold everything nice and straight. So now, let's get to do some cutting. Staves to length. All the staves were cut oversized. Over here we've got a pile of staves. We're not quite ready to get cut up yet. We're getting these set up. And over here, of course, we have our new stave jig and clamp. We have one blank stave sitting there, and we've got the first one cut sitting in my miter guide. So let's show you how I'm going to get this set up to cut all those to length. First and most important.
Warning! Warning!
We never want to use both the miter guide and the fence at the same time. That's just asking for trouble. Your part will get partway through the cut and it will get cocked just slightly, causing pressure between the blade and the fence and immediately throwing this thing back in your face. Over here I've got a sizing block. This is going to be a gauge where I push it up against. So let's get this out of the way. We're not going to be using our jig here until everybody's cut to length. And I've got the first piece cut. I've already measured it. And I know it's the right length, one side to the other. So I'm going to use this as my setup guide. We're going to take this, set it right there in the blade. I've already got the blade angle set, so we place this up against the blade. My camera tripod's in the way. I'm going to have to move over to the other side. I'm going to loosen this clamp for now. And what we're going to do, see right now the camera's right in the middle of where I need to do this. See if I can do it from here. Move it up to where it's just touching. That should be perfect. Now this and the fence is set up for the right size. We'll move this back down to the base. Clamp it down. And now I'll be able to put in the stave blank up against this, and now when I push it down to make the cut, you can see here that it cannot get hung up between the blade and the fence. So we got plenty of room, so it's going to avoid any binding against the blade and causing a kickback. And I'm going to have to remember to put the bandsaw side up. This is going to be the inside of the cone. This is going to be the outside of the cone because this side is not necessarily perfectly straight. So that's the cutting operations, and now it's time to get set up for cutting, but it's getting a little late this evening. So we're going to finish these cuts tomorrow. Okay, it's the next day, and I'm checking my setup, making sure everything where it's supposed to be. Here's the original blank I'm using as a guide. I haven't changed anything. The fence still set, the angle of the blade still set. We're going to set this right up against the fence at about a 90-degree angle. And I'm going to confirm that it slides right in next to the blade. So we're good at the length. Now we're going to confirm I want 13 and 9/16 from the edge here. 13 and 9/16, we're good. So this setup is good. And now what I'm going to be able to do, using this miter gauge, we're going to slide this with the good side down. This will be the inside, cutting this taper. I can't use my crosscut sled because it's not set up to cut tapers, so that's why we're using the miter gauge. Real simple. We're going to shove them up against the guide. We're going to run it through. Why do we use the stop on the fence? Why not just use the fence? As we make this cut, using a miter gauge, you never use a miter gauge in combination with the fence. Using this miter gauge, if I start pushing this through and it's against the fence, and it starts to turn in any way, it's going to bind up against the blade and it's going to cause a kickback. We don't like that. The fence must be further away than the part being cut at an angle. It cannot come in contact with that blade. So, that being said, get all of our pieces ready to cut. is to ensure they're all going to be the same length. I'm just back here getting a place ready to put them down as I finish each cut. Almost ready to go. Get an exhaust fan going. It's time to cut. Now they're all the same length. Next step, we need to cut them into the taper. But before I do that, I'm going to go through and mark each one, the inside, so I make sure I put it on the taper jig in the correct orientation. There's my print, there's my master. I marked them all with the base, which only applies on the first cut, because this side has the taper that goes in here. The fence is already set. To attempt to validate the fence is difficult because this has had both cuts. But I can put this base up against this stop where it's 90 on the stop, and that should be about right, and it should just miss the blade. That's pretty close. So we're going to go ahead and use my push stick on this one. We're going to go ahead and run the first one through. I have 3 extras, so this first one doesn't match my master, then we can resolve that. So I need to check the blade height, and that looks good. End up cutting all the cut ones first as I go through the pile, and then I'll do the cut twos. But for this one, I need to make sure the setup is correct. And we need the clamp. Against this guide, up against the stop. Clamp it down. Nothing can move. And that's about right. It should have ended up right close to the edge, so it's looking good. That is just slightly bigger than my master. So that's good. We can fix that. checking everything here. We're good to go to cut all these boards down. Again, I've got my parts marked. Arrow goes against the base. Push stick in hand. First cut done. Alright, now we're ready for the second cut. I don't know if you can see them. Here we go. There's all the first cuts done over there. And we're ready for the second cut. This one we have to use the clamp. I'm using the clamp because this just was not going to be a safe operation, attempting to use the push stick on here and holding it down. So we've got a clamp in place. Just a refresher, if you didn't see it, I've got a T-nut in the bottom and just a Phillips head, truss head screw holding it down. That's in place. If the first cut is correct, the blade is just going to hit on the corner. And you can see it's just hitting on that corner right here. So we're looking good with the cuts. We're all set up and ready to plow through these. We're going to pause here just a moment for me to point something out. You see me flicking these cutoffs away from the blade. Why do I do that? There was one time I was doing simple cuts like this. This is just as an example. As I was making my cuts, I was allowing the cutoffs to get pushed off the end of the table. What happened while I was doing this is one of these cutoffs drifted over to the blade. And you can see what can happen if it drifts onto this side of the blade catches it and it goes up. Well, right above me, we can see missing a conch on one of these lights. So we don't like it when there are boards cutoffs close to that blade as it's spinning around. And we like to get that out of the way. And when I'm doing this, I don't stand in line with this blade. I'm off to one side. So that's why you see me, if they land too close to this blade, you'll see me flick them away with a very thin board. If this board catches the blade, it's just going to cut right through it. They're all cut. And now the big mystery how am I going to clamp these together to form my cone? Don't know yet. We'll find out in the next video.